Hello and welcome. Find a comfortable position. Let the weight of your body settle. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, a quiet rhythm in the stillness of your room. The day is done, and the world outside can now fade away. There are no demands on your attention here, no tasks to complete. There is only the story. Tonight, we are going to travel back in time, not with the noise and rush of a machine, but on the quiet currents of thought. We will let our minds drift back through the centuries, to a place perched on the edge of a vast, dark wilderness, a place called the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The year is 1692. This is a name and a time you may already know, Salem, a word that has become synonymous with paranoia, with fear, and with fire. But we are not here for the spectacle. We are not here for the shock or the horror in the way that history often presents it. Instead, we are here to understand the quiet, creeping dread that preceded the storm. We will go beyond the shadows of Salem, to feel the chill in the air, to understand the world as they did, and to witness how a community, bound by a rigid and demanding faith, could turn upon itself. We will listen to the whispers that started a whirlwind, examine the strange and desperate magic they practiced in secret, and trace the cold hand of authority that allowed the unthinkable to happen. There is nothing you need to do now but listen. Let the details of this long-ago world wash over you. If you wish to follow the story, it will be here for you. And if you wish to drift away into sleep, then allow the sound of my voice to be a gentle anchor, guiding you softly into your rest. So let us begin our journey. Let us go to Salem Village in the cold, early months of 1692, and let us try to understand. Imagine yourself standing waist-deep in the cold, dark earth of what will one day be another of Amsterdam's iconic canals. It is the year 1636, the month is November, and the sky is a permanent, heavy sheet of grey. The air is thick with the scent of damp soil, of stagnant water, and the sharp, salty tang of the North Sea wind as it funnels through the narrow streets of the city. Your hands, wrapped in thin, worn leather, ache with a deep and persistent chill. They grip the wooden handle of a shovel, its surface worn smooth by your own calluses. The rhythm of your life is dictated by this tool. The scrape of the metal blade against unseen rocks, the wet sucking sound as you lift a heavy load of mud, the grunt of effort, and the splash as the dark earth is tossed onto the growing mound beside you. This is the soundtrack of your days. Scrape, lift, grunt, splash, over and over and over again. All around you, other men are engaged in the same back-breaking ballet, a slow, methodical, and exhausting effort to carve new waterways into the fabric of this burgeoning city. You don't think about the grand purpose of it all, the merchant houses that will one day line these banks, the heavily laden barges that will glide upon these waters. Your world is confined to the next shovelful, the burning in your shoulders, the dull ache in your lower back. As the pale afternoon light begins to fail, your shift ends. You and the others pull yourselves from the ditch, your wooden shoes caked in mud. You walk, not with a stride, but with a weary shuffle through the crowded, narrow lanes. The houses are built tall and tight, leaning against one another as if for support, casting long, dark shadows. The air here smells of coal smoke, of frying fish, and of the ever-present dampness that seems to emanate from the very cobblestones. Your home is a single room on the ground floor of one of these leaning houses. The floor is packed earth, cold and unforgiving. A single window, small and glazed with oiled paper, lets in a murky grey light. In the corner, a small pile of peat waits to be burned for a brief and precious pocket of warmth. The room is shared, of course, a space just large enough for a few straw mattresses on the floor and a small rough-hewn table. It is a life lived in shades of grey and brown. Dinner is what it almost always is. A thick slice of dark, heavy bread and a piece of salted herring. Its oily taste a familiar if unexciting companion. It is fuel, nothing more. It is what your body needs to repeat the rhythm of your work tomorrow. Scrape, lift, grunt, splash. But tonight, you take the few stivers you have earned and walk to a nearby tavern. The warmth that hits you as you push open the heavy wooden door is a physical shock. The room is loud, but not with cheerfulness. It is a low, rumbling hum of men's voices, thick with the sweet, cloying smell of cheap ale and pipe tobacco. You find a space on a bench in a dimly lit corner, the flickering candlelight making shadows dance on the smoke-stained walls. And here, in the relative comfort of this place, you hear the whispers. The whispers are not about the price of grain or the latest news from the Dutch colonies or the endless wars in Germany. The whispers are about flowers, tulips, a man at a nearby table, a baker whose hands are always dusted with flour, speaks in a low conspiratorial tone. He talks of a man he knows, a weaver who sold his loom, the very tool of his trade, his family's security, to purchase a single tulip bulb. Not a flower in bloom, mind you, just a small, onion-like bulb. The others at his table shake their heads, some in disbelief, some in envy. The baker says the weaver sold that bulb just last week to a merchant from Haarlem for 500 guilders. 500 guilders. 500 guilders. You do the math in your head, a slow and difficult calculation. It is more than you earn in 2 years of standing in cold mud, of feeling your muscles tear and mend and tear again. 2 years of herring and dark bread for a root. The stories continue, each more incredible than the last. You hear the names of the tulips spoken with a reverence usually reserved for saints. The Semper Augustus, with its legendary crimson flames on a white background, is spoken of like a mythical beast. Someone whispers that a single bulb recently traded for the price of a grand house on the Herengracht, the most fashionable of the new canals. Another tale is of a farmer who traded 12 acres of fertile land for a bulb of a variety called the Viceroy. You sit in your corner, nursing your small beer, and you try to picture it. You try to understand a world where the back-breaking labor that defines your entire existence is worth less than a flower root that sits dormant in the soil. The absurdity of it is a tangible thing. It feels like a joke being played on you, on every man who works with his hands. The wealth of this great city, it seems, is not being built by the men digging its foundations, but by men in taverns and back rooms trading slips of paper that represent a flower that may not even bloom for another year. The injustice of it is a quiet, burning coal in your gut. It's a silent mockery of your calloused hands, of your aching back, of the cold that has settled deep into your bones. The men in these stories are not so different from you. Weavers, bakers, cobblers, men who took a chance, a gamble on a beautiful, inexplicable fad. The tavern grows louder, the stories more frantic. You hear of colleges, groups of traders meeting in rooms just like this one, bidding prices higher and higher. You hear of men who have never seen a tulip in their lives, who are now experts on the subtle blush of a rosen or the intricate feathering of a violetten. They are drunk, not just on ale, but on the intoxicating possibility of wealth without work. You finish your beer, the last of it tasting sour. You leave the warmth and the noise of the tavern behind and step back out into the cold, damp night. The walk home is slow. The whispers from the tavern follow you, swirling in your mind. A house for a bulb, a farm for a flower. You reach your small dark room, the chill of it a familiar embrace. You lie down on your straw mattress, the scent of damp earth still clinging to your clothes. You close your eyes, but sleep does not come easily. Instead, you see fields of impossibly vibrant flowers. You see stacks of gold coins. And then you feel the familiar ache in your shoulders, and you hear the sound that will greet you in the morning. Scrape, lift, grunt, splash. The rhythm of your life. A constant nagging presence, reminding you of the cold, hard ground beneath a world that has seemingly gone mad. And you wonder, as you finally begin to drift into a shallow, restless sleep, how long this flower fever can possibly last. The dream of easy wealth was a powerful current running beneath the surface of daily life. For every man like our ditch digger, resigned to his fate, there was another who saw the tulip mania not as an absurd joke, but as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. A chance to leapfrog over the established order. Let us imagine one such man. His name is Peter. He is not a laborer, but a skilled craftsman, a weaver of fine wool cloth. His days are spent in his small but well-kept home, the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of his loom a testament to a life of skill, patience, and diligence. His work is respected. The cloth he produces is tight and true, and it fetches a fair price in the market. He has a wife, Annika, and 2 young children. They eat well, their clothes are warm, and their home, while small, is a place of modest comfort, a world away from the damp chill of a ditch digger's lodgings. Peter has built this life with his own two hands, with the careful, practiced movements of his trade. It is a good life, a secure life. But for months, the talk in his guild hall, in the market, in the churchyard after services, has been of the tulip trade. He sees other artisans, men he has known his whole life, suddenly wearing finer coats, spending more freely at the tavern. They speak of their investments, of bulbs whose values double in a single month. They call it a new kind of trade, one where a man's cleverness is more important than the sweat of his brow. Peter initially scoffs at the idea. "It is gambling," he tells Anitja one evening as she mends a stocking by the firelight. "It is folly. Their security is in his loom, in the tangible, honest product of his labor." Anitja agrees, her brow furrowed with worry. She has heard stories of families ruined by such schemes. But as the winter of 1636 deepens, the temptation becomes a constant nagging pressure. The clack-clack of his loom begins to sound slow, plodding, ancient. The modest profit from a week's weaving seems pitiful next to the fortune a neighbor claimed to have made by selling a single bulb he had owned for just a few weeks. The fear of being left behind, of being the fool who stuck to his steady work while others soared, begins to outweigh the fear of risk. And so, after many sleepless nights, Peter makes a decision. He will not sell his loom, the heart of his family's income. That is too great a risk, but there is the money Anitja's father left her, a small inheritance, carefully saved in a locked wooden chest, intended as a dowry for their own daughter one day. It is their safety net, their promise for the future. He convinces his wife with talk of a bigger house, of a life where their children would never have to worry, that this is not a gamble, but a wise investment. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, she gives him the key. Peter takes the small fortune to a tavern known as a college, a meeting place for tulip traders. Pushing through the door, he steps into a world he does not know. The air is dense with pipe smoke and nervous energy. Well-dressed merchants stand shoulder to shoulder with bakers, brewers, and fellow craftsmen. There are no flowers here. There are only men, slates, and scraps of paper. He listens as bids are called out, the names of the tulips sounding like exotic incantations. Gouda, Admiral van der Eyck, Witte Kronen. Guided by a broker, a fast-talking man with ink-stained fingers, Peter makes his purchase. He cannot afford a legendary Semper Augustus, but he buys 3 bulbs of the Witte Kronen, the white crown, a popular variety known for its pure white petals and noble shape. He also buys a handful of cheaper common bulbs. He never sees them. The bulbs themselves are safely in the ground in some grower's field miles away. Peter leaves the tavern holding only a notarized contract, a piece of paper that confirms his ownership. The weeks that follow are intoxicating. Every few days, Peter returns to the college. The price of his Witte Kronen bulbs rises at a dizzying pace. The 300 guilders he paid for one becomes 400, then 600, then 1,000. His paper profits, the value that exists only in the frantic scribbles of the traders, soon eclipse what he could earn in 2 years at his loom. He feels like a genius. The clack-clack of his weaving now sounds like a chorus of victory. He and Anitja begin to dream openly, planning the larger house they will buy, the fine clothes they will wear. The worry in his wife's eyes is replaced by a dazzling excitement that mirrors his own. He is no longer just Peter the weaver. He is Peter the investor, a man of the new age. The mania reaches its absolute peak in late January of 1637. His 3 Witte Kronen bulbs are now valued at over 4,000 guilders combined. It is an astronomical sum, enough to secure his family for life. The broker advises him to sell, to realize his profit. But Peter hesitates. He has heard that the spring auctions will drive prices even higher. Greed, disguised as shrewdness, tells him to wait just a little longer. Just one more increase. Then, in the first week of February, the whispers change. The mood in the college is different. It is quieter. A regular high-stakes auction in the city of Haarlem has ended in failure. The reserve prices were not met. There were no buyers. The news ripples through the trading rooms like a death knell. A sudden, cold sobriety settles over the smoke-filled rooms. The frantic bidding is replaced by a tense silence. Men who had been slapping each other on the back a week earlier now stand in stony-faced groups, speaking in hushed, fearful tones. Peter tries to sell his bulbs. He offers his Vita Kronen contract for 3,000 guilders. No one makes an offer. The next day he asks for 2,000. Still, there is only silence. The men he tries to sell to are trying just as desperately to sell their own holdings. There are no buyers left. Everyone wants to sell and no one wants to buy. The panic is not a loud crash but a silent, terrifying evaporation. The value, which had seemed so real, so solid, simply vanishes. Within a fortnight, the market is gone. A contract for a Vita Kronen bulb, once worth more than a fine carriage, is now worth less than the paper it is written on. Its real value, the value of a simple flower root, is perhaps 1 guilder. The price of an onion. Peter returns home. He does not need to speak. Anatya sees it on his face. The locked chest is empty, the dowry is gone. But it is worse than that. To finance his last few purchases, he had taken a loan against their home. Now the debt is due, and the asset that was meant to pay for it has dissolved into thin air. There is no shouting, no dramatic scene of ruin. There is only a profound and heavy silence in the house, a silence broken only by the cold winter wind whistling outside. The loom in the corner stands untouched, its threads gathering dust. Peter, the man who was so recently a brilliant investor, is now just a weaver again, but a weaver in debt. A weaver who gambled away his family's future. His fortune and the fortunes of thousands like him had vanished like morning mist on a cold canal, leaving behind only the bitter chill of reality. The ruin of men like Peter was real and devastating. But to understand the mania that gripped them, we must look past the smoke-filled taverns and the notarized contracts. We must look to the soil itself and ask a question that puzzled the most expert growers of the 17th century. What precisely made a tulip valuable? Why was one bulb, which looked so much like any other, worth a fortune, while its neighbor was worth less than a potato? The answer lay in the petals. The most common tulips, the ones you might see in a simple garden, were known as kleuren, or self-colored, a uniform coat of red or yellow or white. They were lovely, to be sure, but they were common. They were predictable. The tulips that drove the frenzy were different. They were known as broken tulips. Imagine a flower, the viceroy perhaps. Its petals should be a deep, rich purple. But a broken viceroy was a masterpiece of chance. Upon its purple base, delicate, intricate feathers of pure white would trace their way up the edges of the petals. Or consider the legendary Semper Augustus. It was meant to be white, but on its milky petals, vivid, unpredictable flames of the deepest crimson would lick up from the base, each flower a unique and unrepeatable work of art. This breaking was the mystery that fueled the entire market. A grower could plant a field of solid-colored tulips known as breeders. For years, these bulbs would produce perfectly respectable but unremarkable solid flowers. And then one season, for no apparent reason, a single bulb among them would break. Its flower would emerge transformed, bearing the spectacular patterns that collectors and speculators craved. The Dutch, for all their scientific and artistic progress, could not solve this puzzle. They developed countless theories. Perhaps it was the soil type, they mused. Some growers would mix their soil with plaster, or pigeon droppings, or even the paint scrapings from an artist's studio, hoping to induce the breaking. Others believed it was the age of the bulb, that after 7 or 8 years it would simply mature into its more beautiful form. They called the process rectification, as if they were correcting a plain flower into its true, more perfect state. But it was all guesswork. The breaking remained entirely unpredictable. A grower could not promise a broken bulb. He could only plant his breeders and wait, and hope. This absolute scarcity, this inability to manufacture the most desired product, is what made the broken tulips so rare. You could not order a Semper Augustus to be made. You could only hope to find one. And this rarity, in a nation awash with new money, created a value that was almost mythical. Today, of course, we know the secret. We know what the 17th century botanists could not. The beautiful, chaotic patterns were not a sign of perfection or maturity. They were a symptom of a disease. The spectacular flames and feathers were caused by a virus, now known as the tulip breaking virus. It is a type of mosaic virus, carried from plant to plant by the tiny green peach aphid. When an aphid fed on an infected tulip and then moved to a healthy one, It would transmit the virus, a microscopic agent of change. The virus works in a fascinating way. In a bicolored tulip, the petals have two layers of pigment, a top layer, called an anthocyanin, and a base layer, which is either white or yellow. The tulip-breaking virus infects a flower and begins to sporadically suppress or turn off that top layer of color. So on a red tulip with a white base, wherever the virus acted, the red would vanish, allowing the underlying white to show through. This is what created the beautiful flame-like patterns. The disease was literally painting the flower from the inside out. And here lies the deepest irony of the tulip mania. The very quality that made the tulips priceless was also a sickness that was weakening them. An infected bulb, while producing a stunning flower, was debilitated. Its own life force was compromised. When it produced offshoots, new bulbs for the next season, they were often smaller and weaker than those from a healthy plant. Sometimes the offspring of a magnificent broken tulip would be so weak they wouldn't flower at all, or they would revert to a plain, solid color. So the most sought-after objects in the entire Dutch Republic were, in fact, sick, fragile, and difficult to reproduce. The disease created the beauty created the demand, and the disease's weakening effect created the extreme scarcity. It was a perfect, self-contained engine for economic chaos, a cycle of virology and human desire. The entire speculative bubble, the fortunes made and lost, the story of Peter and his worthless contracts, the grand merchants and the hopeful ditch diggers, all of it was dancing to the tune of an invisible microscopic pathogen. A nation's obsession, a timeless lesson in human folly, was ultimately caused by a beautiful, mysterious illness in a simple flower. A quiet reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces are the ones we cannot see. While men like Peter the Weaver were caught in the dizzying rise and fall of the tulip market, there was another world in Amsterdam, a world that floated serenely above the frantic scrambling below. It was the world of the true merchant princes, the men for whom the entire golden age was turning. Let us imagine a day in the life of one such man, a director of the Dutch East India Company, the mighty Voiceover. His name is Willem van der Meer, and he wakes not to the damp chill of a packed earth floor, but to the soft morning light filtering through a large, paned glass window. The light illuminates the fine dust motes dancing in the air of his cavernous bedroom and falls upon a richly detailed Persian rug that covers the polished wooden floor. He rises from a heavy four-poster bed, its dark wood intricately carved, and slips his arms into a gown not of rough wool, but of imported Chinese silk. From his window, he looks down upon the Herengracht, the grandest of the new canals. He does not see the mud and the grime of its construction. He sees a stately waterway, a monument to the prosperity he has helped to build. On his wall, between a map of the East Indies and a portrait of his stern-faced father, hangs a small, quiet painting of a woman reading a letter by a window. The artist, a promising young man from Delft named Vermeer, has a remarkable talent for capturing light. Willem considers it a pleasant, decorative piece. He descends a wide, sweeping staircase, his hand trailing along the smooth, cool banister. In his study, a servant brings him not beer or water, but a small cup of hot black coffee, a bitter and energizing luxury from the port of Mocha in distant Arabia. The air in his house smells of beeswax, of old leather-bound books, and the faint, sweet scent of cinnamon, a constant reminder of the source of his wealth. His work today does not involve hushed whispers in a tavern. It involves meetings in a grand wood-paneled boardroom. The concerns are on a global scale. A report on the price of cloves in the Moluccas, the Spice Islands. A debate over the financing of a new fleet of ships, great ocean-going vessels that are larger than any house in Peter's neighborhood. A letter from the governor of Formosa discussing tensions with Portuguese traders. His world is one of continents and commodities, of armies and navies, of a vast and ruthless speculation that spans the entire globe. That afternoon, his clerk mentions the latest gossip from the city, the absurd prices being paid for tulip bulbs. Willem listens with a detached amusement. He has heard of this tulip mania. He considers it a frivolous, vulgar pastime for the lower and middle classes, a silly distraction for those with more money than sense. It is a bubble, he remarks to his clerk, and bubbles always pop. It is an insignificant ripple in the local economy, hardly worth a second thought when compared to the real business of global trade. The irony that his own fortune is built upon a far grander, far more consequential bubble of speculative trade is entirely lost on him. In the evening he hosts a banquet. His grand dining room is lit by dozens of beeswax candles in a silver chandelier. His guests are other directors of the company, city magistrates, and a famed portrait painter from Amsterdam named Rembrandt, a man with a wild talent and even wilder spending habits. The table is a testament to the power of the VOC. There are dishes piled high with meats and fish, but all of it is dusted with a fortune in exotic spices. Black pepper from India, which makes the eyes water. Nutmeg and mace from the Banda Islands, worth more by weight than gold. Cloves that numb the tongue, and towering cones of refined sugar, a treasure from Batavia. For these men, the herring and dark bread of the laborer's world is not even a distant memory. It is a reality that simply does not exist. Over wine, one of the guests brings up the tulip craze, laughing about a brewer he knows who traded his brewery for 3 bulbs. Willem smiles thinly. "A fool and his money," he says, taking a delicate sip of his French wine. "They chase after fleeting patterns on a flower petal, while we build an empire that will last for centuries." The conversation moves on, back to politics, to art, to the truly important matters of commerce and control. The ruin of a few thousand weavers and bakers is of no consequence to the architecture of their world. They are feasting while the bubble inflates, entirely insulated from the inevitable messy pop that is to come. And when it does, it will barely register in their grand ordered lives. In the aftermath of the crash of February 1637, a quiet chaos descended. A flurry of lawsuits clogged the courts for years as traders tried desperately to enforce contracts that were now worthless. Bankruptcies were common. The trust between neighbors was broken. The dream of easy wealth had left a bitter hangover, but the nation moved on. The Dutch Golden Age continued its brilliant course for decades more. Tulips, of course, did not vanish. They simply returned to what they had always been: beautiful, cherished flowers. They were planted in gardens, admired for their color and form, and sold for reasonable prices. Their brief mad reign as objects of incredible value was over. The story of the tulip mania has long since cooled from a fever into a fable. It is the story of the ditch digger, whose hard reality was mocked by the promise of effortless fortune. It is the story of Peter, the weaver, who reached for that promise and lost everything. It is the story of the hidden virus, a beautiful disease that unknowingly drove the madness. And it is the story of Willem van der Meer, the merchant prince, who looked on from a great height, untouched and unconcerned, his own grander gamble playing out on a world stage. It is a timeless, gentle lesson in human nature, a story of how a crowd can fall in love with an idea, of how quickly value can be invented, and just as quickly vanish, and how desire can make the most rational people do the most irrational things. But now, all of that is in the distant past. The fevers of the 17th century have cooled. The frantic whispers in the taverns have long since fallen silent. The fortunes won and lost have turned to dust. All that is left for us is the quiet of this moment. The story is over. Let the details fade. Let the names and the places drift away like smoke. There is only the darkness now, the comfort of your bed, and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Allow the last echoes of this dumb history to guide you now into a deep and peaceful sleep. Rest well.